Welcome to the Teachers Pep Rally, everyone. If you
Hello.
our last episode, we had a panel of amazing educators, educational lobbyists, and student teachers to discuss innovative ways to support aspiring educators. If you missed the conversation, go back, check it out on your favorite audio platform, or by visiting our YouTube channel. Please like it, share it, and review it. Our guest is a former classroom teacher turned business coach, trainer, and consultant who brings a fresh perspective on how educators can empower both themselves and their students. She's the author of Coaching in the Classroom, a guide for empowering students and teachers, a transformative book that blends coaching principles with everyday teaching practices. Her work focuses on fostering growth, resilience, and well-being in today's high-pressure educational landscape. Please welcome to the Teachers Pep Rally. I'll only say this once, I promise, Dr. Linda Hoffer.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
We're so
Thanks
excited.
so much for having.
Yes, we're so excited to have you here. And I feel like we have so much to talk about. And I'm going to try to, calm my excitement down so I can let you speak. But I think my first question for you is going to be, what inspired you to merge this world of coaching and teaching in a book?
Okay. Well, it's kind of been my life work, really, because I started out in coaching as a business coach and then became involved in my children's education, which I was very much involved as a parent. It led to a number of different things. But anyway, what really inspired me to go into the classroom and try to bring coaching in was my oldest son dropped out of high school. And I had clients that just kept asking me, why don't we have coaching in the classroom? Why I could have avoided a lot of issues if somebody had coached me, in my personal growth, in thinking about things that I didn't think about at that level. So that's really what led me to that. And so all along, I was wanting to get in the classroom to see how these two could merge. And then just decided, well, whatever I learn, I'm going to write in a book. So that's where it's at.
That's great. I mean, I really do think, it seems like it's common sense that we should be having this kind of just basic practice within education, and we don't for several reasons. And so that's what I'm looking forward to most, I think, about kind of diving into. So as you're shifting from a traditional teaching mindset to a coaching mindset, how does that dynamic change between the teacher and the student?
Well, it is hard. It is a hard mindset because when you're in the teaching mindset, it's completely different from a coaching mindset. And hopefully we'll get into that more, what the differences are. But it completely changes your relationship because you're getting feedback. You're hearing things from students about their emotions, about what's going on, what their dreams are, what they think their strengths are, things that you don't normally connect with a student on. I mean, obviously some teachers are already coaches and doing it. I mean, I think teachers make natural coaches. That's why I want to see teachers doing it because well, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Did you two get into, what brought you into education?
Oh, great question. Pete, do you want to answer it first?
I lost the bet. No. Came from a family of teachers, firefighters, nurses. It's in my wiring. No matter how much I fought it, it just worked out. I was supposed to be a substitute teacher for 2 months, and 19 years later, I'm still there, and I just know it's the right place for me. So, no matter how much I fought it, I realized this is the right place for me. I do think with a lot of the programs I do, I run it from the perspective of a coach and a team.
Yes.
So, and my father was football coach, athlete and all, but me in the arts, I do that. So this really resonates with me.
Good.
Yeah.
How about you, Erin?
Yeah, for me, it was a second career, and that wasn't by choice, just with certain things that kind of happened along the way in, going to get my college degree. I was actually going more towards the counseling end of it, the sociology, social
Right.
work end. And kind of, I graduated, and there were some things I probably needed to do to kind of seal the deal for further education. It just wasn't possible at the time. So I kind of, went different ways in the business world, which ended up, funny enough, just kind of like you were talking about. I think when I finally said, you know what, this is really, kind of hit a low and got laid off. And someone said, what is it you've always wanted to do? And I was like, be in education. So I went back to
Mhm.
school and got my master's in education. And it was the best thing I could have done. So I think for me too, it was, I love to nerd out. I love books. I love to read. I love to have like serious philosophical questions and all these kinds of things. But at the same time, oh, and I love to, diagram sentences and all the but I think, Linda, my favorite thing about being in education was really to make connections and try to help people find their passion in life and then hopefully go on and and do it. And I don't know if that's something a teacher can just do. I think some of the things that we're going to be talking about today is you've got to learn how to coach people up, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now notice that neither one of you said, I can't wait to get in that classroom and teach those kids how to be successful on that test.
Nope.
That is not why educators got into education. It's not to teach to a test, but that is the system we have. And as you know, everything is geared towards that. Everything is. And so I feel like coaching, I mean, that's why coaching and teaching to me are so along the same lines, because teachers want students to be able to live to their potential, to find out who they are, and live that life. And we don't have the mechanisms for it. I feel like our education system squeezes that out. I know for myself, I did have teachers that helped me see things from different perspectives, that opened up the world, that helped me figure out what my strengths were. But I feel like now teachers are so overwhelmed and so tired of um, just trying to teach to the test. And here's where it's really difficult, and this is why I think we need coaching, because we're basically told as teachers, okay, you need to motivate those kids, you need to engage them, you need to make sure that they're successful on taking this test. Yet what are we saying to kids? Oh, this test is such high stakes and you really need to pass it and do well on it. And if you do, I get to keep my job and the school looks really great. And they're looking at you like, well, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
It's a college readiness test. And even if you're going to college, you need more skills than just passing a college readiness test.
Yeah.
I think we're doing a huge disservice to our students. We're not really preparing them for the world outside of school. And so when we're coaching, we're shifting that perspective, not just on academics, but we're shifting it to your personal growth and development. I can't do that for you. This is the empowerment piece, because students don't feel like they have any power or any control in school. A lot of them don't have it in their lives at all. This is the piece they do have control over. And we have to convince them that you do have that power, that you can make changes. And the best thing that we can do at this level is self-awareness and helping them figure those things out. And how do you take care of yourself? I can't tell you that. I can give you perspectives, I can give you tools, I can give you strategies, but you ultimately are the person who has to decide. I can't tell you what you find beautiful. I can't tell you when you feel a sense of accomplishment. You have to take ownership of that. And I think it is very empowering for kids. And when we give them those tools, just even if a student is going to college. Now, I taught in a district that was 63% low income.
Mhm.
Okay. We have students who don't want to go to college, but we don't give them any other options. We don't give them your last conversation with your high school principal, or I guess it was the time before, and he said, we need more options. We need to expand what we're offering students, and that there should be internships. There should be apprenticeships, where they can go out and actually see where they're and practice using their strengths. We don't really do that. And so I just feel like helping students decide for themselves and make the learning more relevant. I mean, let's face it, we learn all the time. It's not just from 7:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. You are constantly learning on an individual level, okay, and not just academics. So what are you learning? How can you use that learning? What can it do to help you maneuver through this? So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but
No, it's great. And Pete, I'm sitting here thinking Linda is the perfect person for the pep rally. Like right? Like I already feel inspired, and I'm like, let's start tomorrow.
I just skipped like 10 questions, like done, check, she covered, perfect. Let her just talk. Let her cook.
Yeah. Well, see, so let's talk about, let me ask you another question.
Okay.
So what percentage of the students in your building would you say are thriving, flourishing in school?
Mhm.
Flourishing.
Probably less than 50%.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I'm honest, and I'm even thinking on a national level. So let's not even think about like our specific schools. I'd say it's probably 50% or below. It's not we're not meeting their needs, their standards.
I don't think they're flourishing.
That's exactly right.
You have students, I think, who are coping, who are making the best of it, but are they flourishing? I don't think so. Can I read you a couple of things that students said in the New York Times in 2019? So it was just before the pandemic.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so this is a high school student from Wilmington, North Carolina. I personally think that there are many things wrong with the American education system. Everyone is so worried about grades and test scores. People believe that those things are the only things that represent a student. If you get a bad grade on something, you start believing that you're a bad student. GPA does not measure a student's intelligence or their ability to learn. At young ages, students stop wanting to come to school and learn. Standardized testing starts and students lose their creativity. Okay, these are students. That just hurts my heart when I read this stuff. Yep. Here's another one. Personally, for me, I think standardized tests have a negative impact on my education. Taking a test does not actually test my knowledge. Instead, it forces me to memorize facts that I will soon forget.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where students are at. There was a study done by Yale. This blew my mind. 75% of the students, and this was a large sample, it was like 21,000 students. 75% of them had negative feelings about school, with tired, bored, and stressed being the top. I mean, I don't know about you, but as a parent, as a grandparent, that's not what I want for my kids.
No.
I want them to learn how to maneuver outside of school. I think this is where I think coaching comes into education. Why shouldn't we be using school for students to practice resilience, overcoming adversity, emotional intelligence? Well, wait till I get on that subject.
That's where I love emotional intelligence. That's my bag. So yes. Yeah. How do we start making, like you talked about self-awareness and emotional intelligence? I think you have kind of like this empowerment model, right? That's what you're kind of putting this under that umbrella of it. So what can we start trying to do in our classrooms, in our schools, or even within our school districts, like, right? Embedding that as part of the culture. What does that start to look like?
Okay. Well, coaching is all about asking questions, right? And this is the difference, because as a teacher, I'm going to ask questions. I'm looking for a specific answer or a specific thought process. Okay. As a coach, I'm asking the questions so that you can discover yourself. I have no attachment to the outcome.
Yes.
I have nothing to do with that. That's you. So it's asking questions, always asking questions. That's one of the biggest things you can do. When I'm teaching, I have a set curriculum. I have a sequence I have to go through. I have benchmarks. I have tests. I have projects so that I can give you a grade, so that I can evaluate you. But when you're being coached, when you're a student who is being coached, you set the outcomes. You decide what you want to do. You decide how that looks. I don't do that. And I don't have a curriculum or an outcome. I'm basing it on what I see as your personal growth needs in the classroom. So emotional intelligence, I think, is where we have to start. Because, and I'll tell you this drives me. Have you ever heard of the book by Dan Goleman, Emotional Intelligence?
Yes.
Okay. That was written 30 years ago. 30 years ago. At the time that it came out, I was coaching in business, and it was like a handbook for coaching. Okay. And now, 30 years later, it is 100% permeated the work culture. It just, it just has. And you're evaluated on that. We don't even really talk about, I mean, that's what social emotional learning is, but we don't make that a top priority, and we certainly don't test on it. Yeah. But what we have found after 30 years of research is that your emotional intelligence is a greater indicator of success than your IQ. Mm-hmm. But we're giving an IQ test, really, essentially, is what we're doing. Yeah. But, and we're not, I mean, at least it should have equal billing. But kids are coming out of school and they're being expected to have some modicum of emotional intelligence, and many of them do not. Yeah. And if you look at our Gen Zers, oh my gosh, these are our COVID babies. These are kids who have been brought up on technology. Just this past fall, I was reading from the business community. They're not hiring Gen Z. They don't have the people skills. They don't have the attitudes. They're missing a lot. So to me, that just shows me that we need to be working with emotional intelligence in our schools. And the very first thing that you do is create an awareness by asking the questions. And I do it very simply. Teachers don't have time. Right. We don't have time. Right. So the way I structured it was the model that I used is I would introduce a topic, like let's say, and at the beginning of the year, it seems to be easier to fill in that gap because you're just gearing up. And I know for myself, I taught business and Spanish. So, you're going at it kind of slow to build. That's the perfect time to introduce emotional intelligence right off the bat. And truthfully, you need to be addressing it all year long. But, and there are so many resources now out there from social emotional learning. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to get those. But I start out very simply, what is emotional intelligence? Why is it important? What do you need? I used YouTube a lot, YouTube videos. And then I would just have the kids start noticing. I would just say, okay, so like set a timer on your phone for 3 times today and just jot down what emotions you're feeling. That's all. Just observe it. Don't make any judgments about it. Just say, oh, this is what I'm feeling. Because when we start that, you're automatically starting to create a space between the emotion, observing it. That gives you the space to make a different decision about a reaction. So that's where we start, right? Just noticing your emotions, just owning them. Some students can't even identify what emotions they're feeling. Right. So the other thing I do is I show like expressions. And we would have discussions about, well, what do you think that person's feeling? So you can also understand what other people are feeling.
Yeah.
And many times you can't tell from their face. You know, we would have that discussion. Well, is that frustration? Is that anger?
Yeah.
You know, it starts opening them up to thinking about how those emotions affect them. And we know that the emotions also affect our body.
Yeah.
Okay. We get chemical reactions from that. Pay attention to where you're feeling it. It's just that awareness. And then eventually students can start saying, okay, this happened. In fact, I even had students, when I just had them observe, they were already trying to figure out why they were feeling those feelings.
Yes.
And they were able to match it to a particular thought. And that's where we want to go, because guess what? We can change our thoughts.
Yep. And I think that, you know, if anyone's listening to this and thinking, oh, that seems really hard or scary or takes a lot of work, honestly, like you said, if you start introducing it, it's amazing how quickly people catch on, the students catch on to
Yes.
that, and the conversations start to change, right?
Right.
The realization of, oh, my stomach's hurting. Well, do you have do you have a test today? You know, you can start asking those kinds of
Yes.
questions. I do. Well, maybe, do you think it's maybe you're just a little nervous? Like, let's talk about that. You know, what, you know, do you
Right.
feel like you're prepared? You know, just opens up those conversations. And Pete and I have talked about this a lot, about making those connections with your students. Like, that's really what it's
Yes.
about, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that's what you're kind of providing, is just conversations to start thinking about how to help your students try to make connections with other people, because you're modeling that yourself.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
I do want to make it clear that in my model, because teachers don't have time, this is not the typical one-on-one coaching model. You can't. I
Yeah.
mean, you will have opportunities to do that, but it's not one-on-one coaching, it's group coaching. And so that's why so much of the responsibility goes to the student. Because
That's,
as a teacher, I don't have time. I can't. All I can do is offer it and hope you take advantage of it.
yeah. And
Um,
I think it's fun to learn from our students, though, right? That's,
yes,
you're also, Linda, offering an opportunity for us to do that, right? And that can
yes.
again be scary for us as the adults in the room, or
Hmm.
for Fred, who teaches, you know, young adults to adults. But um, I think when you start trying to take those little educated risks and follow a guide like you've provided, it just kind of
Hmm.
helps people to try it and see what happens, right? So
Right.
speaking of, so our I think I told you our listeners love a good list or
Hmm.
some kind of steps towards action when they're listening to these conversations. What are 3 coaching inspired practices that they could start doing to transform their classroom tomorrow?
Okay. I will tell you this. This was my favorite thing. I couldn't do it in high school and it killed me, but it was so effective in middle school. Um, and you wouldn't think so. And this is scary, okay? Um, but I started every class with what I called meditation. I probably wouldn't call it that now. I'd call it mindful breathing or breath work or whatever. But every class starting it like that, you know, at first with middle schoolers, of course, you got kids going like this, making sure, you know, looking at everybody, making inappropriate noises, giggling because
Yep.
it's awkward. They're not used to it. But, you know, after a while, they settle down. And I noticed like near the end of the year, the kids liked it because it was a way to just decompress for a minute. And so teaching them breath work, and there's so many models out there, but the one you want is where you inhale for like a count of 4, hold it for 4, but let it out on 6 to 8, because that is what calms the vagus nerve, which brings you down into the relaxation response. So anytime you can do that, and I would do that just, you know, at the beginning of every class, take a couple minutes, and the kids got to where they loved it. In fact, I had a student who is now a young adult with a child, but he told me, he said, that started me on meditation. I do it to this day. He said, I can't tell you how much that has helped me. So that to me is a big one. Now I'll tell you, I'm going to share a story because this is one of my favorite stories. So this is like an 8th grade class. It's near the end of the school year. We've been doing this for a long time, and we're settling down. And I say, okay, close your eyes. Let's take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. We relax, and then this student lets out this very loud fart right in the middle of the class.
Yep.
Which, of course, the whole class just erupted. So I'm trying to get them settled down and everything. And I finally said, okay, come on, you guys, let's settle down. Okay, close your eyes, take a deep breath. And the child that was sitting next to the student held his nose and said, no way am I taking a deep breath. Oh, it was just kind of funny.
Yeah.
Typical middle school, right?
Yeah. And
So-
probably elementary. Pete, does that sound like a daily occurrence?
Every day of my life.
So, but
And then
the bottom line is they really they came to really like coming to my class and having that minute to just relax and get centered again. And we all need that. I needed that as the teacher. And this is where the coaching relationship is co-collaborative, because I'm learning in the process about me as well when I'm teaching, right? And when I'm coaching. So that's, to me, that is a really wonderful, I think, practice to give students. And if they don't want to participate, I never force them to, but they could not disturb anybody else. And I just think a lot of students come to use it, like the one student I talked about, where they make it a regular practice and it helps them. These are the things that they need. That's how you relieve stress, right? So that's one. The other one is just asking the questions, always asking the questions. So how did you feel about that? I mean, if you're teaching English or history or any of those things, you have such a rich subject to talk about, emotions, to talk about feelings, to talk about reactions, to ask the questions. Well, if you were in that situation, how do you think you would have felt? How do you think you would have acted? Have you had a similar situation? How would that course of history have been changed if somebody had acted differently? You see, there's always ways that you can ask those questions to get them thinking more deeply about themselves. Okay, what does that mean to you? So that's what I think. So asking questions, doing some kind of breath work, I think, is really important. That will change it really quickly as well. And then the other thing that I would do is doing the emotional intelligence, because that's just too important. And that we know that you cannot be successful if you can't control your emotions, if you can't control your impulses, if you can't stop from harming yourself. And we can't leave that all up to our social workers and our psychologists and everything in the school. I feel like, in fact, I just gave a workshop not too long ago with therapists who work in schools. And it was like, wow, if we could be doing this together, think of what we could accomplish, because they're working on the same things, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think those are probably the 3 places that I would start, because that's going to help the most, I think.
Yeah. So. And I think those are very reasonable. I think any one of those, if this sounds a little bit scary to anyone, but they want to take a chance, I think just pick one and go for it. And I think you might be amazed at the results, for sure.
And I always say, it doesn't, the real power is in if you can find other people in your building who will do this too. Because a student that I can't reach, you can, and vice versa. And if they're hearing the same language and the same kind of, I guess, strategies or tools, it's going to have a bigger impact. Can you imagine 4 years of that? I mean, that would so help them be prepared for the outside world. if they can handle their emotions, if they start recognizing what their strengths are. That's the other thing that you can do that's real simple. When you see a strength in a child, tell them. Just tell them. Even if it's like, wow, you have great fashion sense. I love how you put those things together.
Yeah.
We live in a very negative world. And so the more we can empower, lift up, counteract the negative, which we have in our school system, because think of the language we use. Oh, we need to have remediation. You're not making standards. You're deficient in this area. I mean, a child who hears that year after year after year, it's learned helplessness. It's fixed mindset.
Yeah.
We need to change that. And unfortunately, we have a system that funnels all kids down into this cattle chute to put them on an assembly line of learning at the same pace to come out at the end for a college readiness test. We have to counteract that. Teachers are the only ones who can do it. And teachers, oh my gosh, you have so much insight into your kids. You have so much knowledge. You have so much innate wisdom that you teachers are the ideal coaches in the classroom. That's just I think we are leaving so much of that talent on the table, and we need to utilize it. And if we can't wait for the system to change. We have to do something now. It needs to be grassroots effort. We have to help these kids. And many times I know I felt, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help them. This is a way. Even if you're just doing one or two things and you're adding to them like every year.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes. You don't know how you're impacting that student. And we know that. We know that as teachers. And so you can tell I'm very passionate about this. I apologize.
No,
we
love this. Is what this is about, right, Pete?
The beauty of this is it all of this can be seamlessly and very naturally incorporated in a nurturing, happy, holistic classroom. Like these are just common sense.
Yes.
This year, my school, before the proper school day starts, well, it's about 40 minutes into, we have something where Cougar Pride, our animal's the cougar, our mascot's the cougar. So we have Cougar Pride time, and kids go to small groups for different things. And this year we started that the art teacher, the STEM teacher, and me, the music teacher, we get a group to help out. And we're doing social emotional, we're doing behavior, we're doing, what is this feeling you're feeling? Disappointment? I understand that feeling. Yes, you're going to feel a lot of that in life, and it's going to be okay. What's your
just acknowledging their feelings.
It's like, and everybody goes through this. And these kids, like, I do have a book that I follow. I follow the best I can. I think the lessons that we make up together organically are better than what's in the book.
Yes.
The kids just want to talk and be heard. And they want to share their highs and their lows. They want to share.
Yes.
So I get a vibe on what's going on. I have an idea what we're going to do, but I love it when we go off-road and we go in a different direction.
Right.
And when those kids leave, I say to myself, they're standing an inch taller. The smile's a little bit broader today. And the behavior is improving in a lot of these kids.
Yes.
We're not asking to change them. We're just asking them to help them shine a little bit brighter from the inside. Let them find their voice and let them understand what are these feelings they're going through. So I'm on board top to bottom with this.
Yeah, we're with you on this. So I'm sitting here thinking, paired with this idea of self-discovery and confidence building goes with ownership of learning, right?
Yes.
So what are some of the things that you have seen in the classroom or that you have done where you help students to own their learning?
Okay. So for example, teaching Spanish, you have to memorize. There's no way you can learn it without some memorization in place. And so there are so many different ways to memorize and to learn vocabulary, which you probably as an English teacher know that as well. And so I give them all these different methods and we practice them. And then I tell them, okay, you pick the ones that work for you or design your own. And they do. They took ownership of it and they figured out, oh, I need a partner to quiz me with cards. That works best for me. Well, I work better if I hear the word. So I'm going to go on the audio and listen that way. And that helps me learn that better. Or I'm going to do rote learning repetition. So they figured that out. Or I'm going to do word association. Or I'm going to use multiple different ones. And I actually had students who, and then you say, okay, you've learned these. Where else can you use this? Where else is this applicable? What other classes? What other part in life? And that's the thing I think you have to keep pointing out to make the learning relevant. We have to say, where else can you use this skill? Like, for example, another one that I spent, and this was also in CTE and business. This was a skill. We talked about paying attention to details. Because in Spanish, if you have an accent in the wrong place, or it changes the entire meaning of the word.
Right.
In business, if you transpose a letter or you call somebody Mr. instead of Mrs., that's a big error. That's going to influence whether you're going to make a sale or whether you're going to be able to talk to that person. So helping students understand, okay, well, where else would that be applicable? Why is learning detail or paying attention to detail important? And they, doing taxes, signing a contract for a car. I mean, they begin to see the broader learning involved. And that's the other thing that you can coach students on. Okay, we're learning this skill, but this isn't a skill that we just use in the classroom. This is a skill you can use in your life now if you want to.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do, because right now the learning isn't relevant to a lot of these students. You hear over and over again, why do I have to learn that? I'm never going to use it. The other thing I say is, okay, you're never going to use it, but it's brain training. And your brain, especially at high school age, adolescence, your brain's on steroids. And that's why I would tell kids, you are learning more than you will ever learn in your entire life. Okay. The only other time that compares is when you were in the womb. Yeah. So how do you want to use this time? Learn as much as you can and recognize this tremendous tool that we have. So just always trying to make the learning more relevant in the classroom and say, what are you learning about yourself in this process? You hate this assignment. Why do you hate it?
Yeah.
Because you don't feel confident or confident in that. What can you do to take steps to move that? I mean, it's always asking the questions, I think, and not taking it on yourself. That's the hardest part of being a coach. You have to let go of the outcome.
Yes.
You have to let go of it.
Yeah.
So, and let it be theirs. Because the minute you start saying, well, I think you should do this and you should, then you've lost them. They don't need any more of that in their lives right now. People telling them what to do. So
I always love talking about different learning styles. And like you said, doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has just one. It can be multiple. I would use my personal story. So I'm dyslexic, and it wasn't discovered until I was in college, because I had such a high IQ and was gifted and all this kind of stuff. So I found ways to, overcome it, not even overcome it. I mean, as much as I love to learn, I was struggling, and people had no idea. And it wasn't until I got to college I got figured out. But anyways, I had a professor that sat down with me a couple times in the evening once this was discovered, to kind of teach me about my brain and how I learn, and how the way that I learn and absorb things. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just the way that the majority of people teach, or the way that our classrooms are set up, just doesn't doesn't set in with me. And memorization is one of them. It's a hard thing for me to
Yes.
lock that in. I have to do it with colors and visuals. So
Yes.
he taught me how to do that, and it was extra work, but I would just take regular notes or whatever in class. And then when I'd be back in my dorm, I would convert those to these pictures and colors and things like that. And
Right.
it was amazing the difference that it made. So I would share that with my students as a way of just kind of letting them know it's
Yes.
an opportunity to discover that, and it's never too late. But then we would talk about, just like you said, the different ways that we learn. And obviously for me, it's with colors and visuals and stuff like that. Audio doesn't work for me. My processing for audio is really
Mm-hmm.
not great. But for others it is. And so what I would do
Right.
is sometimes, Linda, have these lesson plans where they would come in, and even if they didn't know, and there's certain tests you can do where they can kind of see what they prefer or
Right.
don't prefer. But a lot of students really had no idea. And so I would have these, I'd be like, okay, today's going to be learning styles day. And if this doesn't work today, next time try a different one. But right now, it seemed like you were more on this kind of scale. And
Right.
so we would be all doing the same standard, whether it's with a poem or whatever, but they all had a different way to assess themselves and learn depending upon their learning style. And I used to
Right.
love to do that just because it was just neat to hear them, like you said, have these conversations with each other of like, man, I never really realized how much I needed the kinesthetic, like bouncing the ball
Right.
while trying to think helped
Yes.
me better. So yeah, take risks, do it. It's so
Right.
amazing what what
Right.
you're saying. When you become more of that coach,
Mm-hmm.
you end up getting just as excited as your students, I think, again, about
Yes.
learning.
For sure.
Yes. Yes. And I would set it up at the beginning of the year and tell them, I'm not just interested in your success academically. I'm interested in your success in life.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that you learn skills, abilities, perspectives that move you into being the best version of you. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that
Yes.
what we want for kids? So
Yes.
why don't we focus on that? That's what I don't understand. And why I see this is the part that drives me nuts. I have a 2.5-year-old granddaughter. Do we tell her at 1 years old, no, sit down. You cannot walk for another 3 days. No, and no, you cannot say mama and dada as your first words. You have to say this or whatever. We don't do that. But all of a sudden they hit kindergarten. No, you have to be on this, you know, projection, blah, 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 on this with everybody else. It's so wrong. And I tell this story about myself in college. I mean, I have never been a whiz at math. I'm like you, I'm very verbal, communicative, whatever, right?
Mhm.
So I go to college and I put off at that time, I mean, this is a long, long time ago. They only had one requirement for math. You only had to take one math class to graduate. And I put it off to my last year, which was dumb because that means now I've had 3 years without math, right? But not only was it dumb in that way, but I actually, if I'd taken it before my senior year, I could have taken a class that was the history of math without it being a real math class. So I go into this class and I have to have it to graduate. And it's a new PhD from the University of Illinois. And he says, I'm gearing this towards math majors. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh boy.
Oh no.
So, of course, I flunked the first test. It was a small school. So I went to the dean and I said, and by that time, many other students were having the same issues because not all of us were math majors. And I said, I need this class and to graduate. And so they set up what they called lovingly the dummy math class. And
Oh.
it was for those of us who couldn't do the math major one. We covered half the book that class did. But I tell you to this day, and I mean, I have a lot of education, but that's one of the classes I'm most proud of because I got an A in it. But it proved to me I can learn it.
That's
I
right.
just can't learn it at the same pace as everybody else. So why are we doing this to our kids? I don't get it. But
Yeah.
we can't change that. But what we can change is helping our students appreciate their differences. I mean, I tell them, I say, look, we're all here in Earth School. We've all got our lessons to learn. We come here in different families with different personalities, with different skin color, with different hair color, with different goals, with different interests. Everything's different. Why are we comparing ourselves to each other? Your job is to figure out how you can be that best version of you and appreciate who you are. Figure out what your strengths are. I think what's really discouraging, though, I know it was for me, is that especially if you're in a school district that does have students that struggle, who are low income, maybe don't have the same opportunities that a lot of our other students do. By the time you get them in high school, they are already learned helplessness. The system has, they don't think they can succeed no matter what they do. And that's heartbreaking to me. That we got to change that. And Martin Seligman, who's the one who discovered, he was the psychologist in 1967. He and I think Stephen Mayer maybe was his name. They did the experiments with the dogs where they figured out learned helplessness, that they just stood there and accepted the shocks even when they could avoid them. Okay. That's what started him thinking, okay, well, if helplessness can be learned, can optimism be learned? And that's what started the positive psychology movement, which is the study of human flourishing.
That's right.
So that's what we need to start focusing on in our schools.
That's amazing. I love it so much. And I think it's also mentorship, right? Like those kinds of things. And these are all things, like you said, we still have our curriculum, we still have our standards, we still have our standard-based tests. Fine. We can still incorporate these things along with it.
Yes.
We really, really can. So speaking of mentorship, I'm kind of curious to hear, we ask all our guests this question. Is there a teacher, a coach, or a mentor, or someone, it could be growing up or could even be recently, that has inspired you? We love to hear these stories.
Well, I actually have two.
Great.
And one was my high school world history teacher. He just brought world history alive for me, and it was a class that you could have discussions, that you could explore yourself relative to world history. I feel horrible because I can't remember his name, but and that's what spurred me to go to South America as an exchange student.
Oh, wow.
And then the other one was my college professor, my Spanish college professor, and I felt he was well loved by everybody at the school because he always treated everyone as if they were the most important person he was talking to in the moment. And I thought that's such a key.
It's a gift. Yeah.
It's a gift. It's
Yep.
such a gift. And so, yeah, so that's pretty much it. But
I love that so much. Well, if any of you all would like to share your teacher story, we do have a hotline, 470-227-0877. Again, 470-227-0TPR. Share your story and we'll share it with everyone. I think that this is what we got to keep doing, right? Is telling
Yep.
these stories of
Yes.
educators that are
yes.
making a difference and sharing how they're making connections with each other. Linda, if our listeners, our friends out there want to make a connection with you or even buy your book, which I know is
Yes.
available on
This is
Amazon.
the book.
Yes.
Coaching in the Classroom. It's available for in Barnes and Noble, anywhere that you can buy books. You can also reach me. My website is lindahopperphd.com. My email is linda@lindahopperphd.com. So you can contact me that way. I do have if you sign up for my newsletter, I'm putting a cohort together of teachers in August. It'll be 6 weeks online, once a week. It will start out 2 sessions at the beginning of August. And then while teachers are taking care of the classroom and stuff, we won't pick up then till the end of August and do another 4 weeks. But it's to help. I'm really looking for teachers who are serious about doing this, because what I want is the feedback from them. And so that I can create an online course that anybody can take on at their own pace. So that's kind of where I would love for people, if you're interested, shoot me an email, let me know.
That's awesome.
So
Great.
thank you so much for having me. I love this conversation. I wish we had another hour.
I know, us too, us too. And Pete, how do our friends continue this conversation as they hear and get inspired by Linda
Right.
with us?
Everybody, wherever you're listening to us or watching us, whether it's on YouTube or your favorite preferred podcast player, please leave us a review, subscribe, like, whatever it takes to spread word about this great conversation. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. And then, Erin, speaking of amazing things for teachers, I know you're going to be busy this summer.
Yeah, we have got a small cohort of people this summer for 3 days in Orlando. If you haven't registered, it is not too late. And we will be talking about personalized learning. We'll also be working with some of our friends from eduaid.ai. So if you're curious about using AI in a relevant and useful way for your work, your role in your classroom with your students, come. They're going to do a session there. We're just going to have fun. We're going to explore and discover ourselves and remember why we love being teachers. So come join us, inspirededucation.info, for more information and to register. Linda, thank you so much for coming. You pepped us up. I tell you what, we appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Bye.